This episode is dedicated to the memory of my Aunt Lyn, who is a first-class Beach Boys fan. Brothers and Sisters is the common thread between the two segments that make up this week's EPS Podcast short episode. Brothers Brian, Carl, and Dennis Wilson made up the core members of the Beach Boys, the group responsible for the many rock and roll hits collected in the first segment's topic, Endless Summer. While the March sisters, Joe, Beth, Meg, and Amy, are the focal point of Louisa May Alcott's 1868 classic, Little Women, whose 1954 Scholastic book's abridged version is analyzed in the second part of today's episode.
You want the poster on the wall.
I've been tempted to put that up,
Look
but
at that beautiful.
it's really nice.
That's beautiful. Oh yeah.
I've been tempted to put it up, but I'm afraid it's going to get ruined
Oh yeah.
by
Mine playing
adding it
with,
to the...
the thing that of course gets dragged along behind it down the beach.
Right.
Right, definitely.
So I'm here with Nancy, and Nancy works here at Strawberry Bank, and when I worked here, we would oftentimes have the same shifts, right? We would...
Yeah.
And I miss it sometimes, especially dressing up in 18th century garb on 95-degree days.
Like,
you know?
Exactly. It definitely shows you what you're made of.
Right.
Right?
and tells you what people used to be made of.
Oh my gosh.
That they could stand it, you know, and...
They didn't know any different. That's the part. We know that we can be in shorts and,
Right.
Shorts.
They didn't know any different. But speaking of nostalgia and summer weather, you plucked from the table today my copy of the LP version of the Beach Boys' Endless Summer, which came out in 1974.
Right.
And it's essentially a greatest hits album, but I think it's interesting they don't call it that. It's just called Endless Summer.
Right.
And the cover art and everything really makes it look like it's a brand new album. But the question that you selected to talk about today is what material is it made from, and/or how was it made? So when you look at the song listings, what strikes you about those?
Well, of course, it's all California. Surfer Girl, Catch a Wave, California Girls, all summer long. These Little Deuce Coupe, of course, these are things that everybody wanted to go to California because something was there, either in the water or the air or something. Everybody wanted to be a surfer because it just looked a lifestyle where not a care in the world.
Right.
You spend your summers in the water and the sunshine, and in the wintertime it doesn't snow. So
and that's
thing,
and
right?
it definitely evokes the feelings of an early 1960s California, Southern
definitely.
California, that all these songs came from.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's why do you think that 1974? Because I think this album, and it's kind of rare for a greatest hits album to go like double platinum.
Oh.
I mean, it was hugely popular in its time period. Why do you think people responded to it so much in 1974?
Well, I think the 60s were a time of freedom, and maybe people are kind of hearkening back to that. Those people, going platinum, it was people that were younger that were buying it, but probably also people who had grown up in the 60s and maybe went to college in the 60s, and is kind of invoking those times where they didn't have, simpler times. They didn't have a whole lot of responsibilities and, college life and that kind of thing. So it could have been that. But
I feel like there's a remarkable transition in the 60s from the innocence and the economic boom of the post-war years to then with Vietnam really kind of sinking into a quagmire and infecting really the whole country with an overall negative feeling.
That was good.
And in 1968, when Richard Nixon, another California product, became president, it was seen as like kind of returned to the good old days because he was vice president under Eisenhower.
Right.
But then by 1974, there's Watergate.
Oh, yes.
So
Definitely.
this album would be a welcome reminder of a simpler time just a decade earlier.
Right, without all these wars, without all the political stuff going on, President Eisenhower and how things were right after World War II, and everybody's doing well. So
it's so funny how quickly that nostalgia cycle,
definitely
really kept going.
So great to see this, Eric. Thank you. Now I've got to go home and see if I can find
blast some Beach Boys,
on my Amazon Music or whatever. Yeah. No, it's just I just remember, all summer long, and not only their really upbeat ones, but the ballads.
Yeah, like Surfer Girl, In My Room. Those are some really great songs.
Definitely.
I mean, Brian Wilson's easily a musical genius.
Easily.
Putting together so many of those.
Easily. So.
Everything from I Get Around to, God Only Knows.
I know, and then just fun ones like that help me Rhonda, but also the Little Deuce Coupe and that kind of thing. Like racing your cars down Main Street. Which we don't do anymore.
Right, but it just makes you think of like American Graffiti, which also came out in the same exact time period.
It did.
There was a huge nostalgia in the early 70s with good reason. People were just longing for the simpler times of just a decade earlier. It's crazy.
Yeah, so...
Thanks for stopping by.
Oh, you're welcome. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
And now I got to look for home.
Well, I'm glad you analyzed it because a lot of people were looking at it and they never got around to it.
So Ruthie's with me here at Loaded Question in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, on the EPS podcast, and you selected a copy of Little Women. And the household that I live in, I live with a librarian. I'm married to her. I don't just live with some lady who's a librarian. And that is her all-time favorite book.
Oh, really?
So she has several copies, and she's finding out right now that when she hears this, that I took one of her copies and incorporate into the collection tonight. What brought it to your attention? Why did you want to talk about Little Women tonight?
Well, I absolutely love books, but I can't say that it has a special significance for me because I grew up in England.
Oh.
And I didn't read it as a young woman.
I see.
I did not read it.
You did not read it.
But my daughter absolutely loves the film, which came out kind of recently, I think.
Yeah, which version? Because there's, and that's something I was definitely wanting to talk about with this. And I brought this copy of Little Women to a lot of these, and nobody's ever picked it up. And I think it's strange because unlike so many other stories, not only have there been many versions of the book, there's also been a lot of versions of the film.
That's right.
And there was one that came out about 3 years ago.
Yeah, that's
and
the one.
That's the one. And then there was the one from the early 1990s with Winona Ryder, and it seems like the movies and the books have their own different lives to them.
Yeah.
But what do you think is it about the story of Little Women that appeals to such a timeless audience?
Well, I think it might be because there's a girl to appeal to everybody. Like everyone can find their alter ego kind of thing.
Have you ever been to Orchard House in Concord, Massachusetts?
I have not. Well, I've been to Concord, Massachusetts, but I didn't go to her house. We need to do that.
That's on the list, and I think they owe me money now for talking about them on the EPS podcast. But I've been there a few times. Like I said, wife's favorite book, so it's within reach. And I think that is why people go there, because the book is so autobiographical for Louisa May Alcott. Like Jo is her, and May is Amy, and Meg, all the way down the line. And so you're right. It seems timeless because And the movies, most of the movies do a good job of communicating this, that the even though it's the 1860s that it's all taking place, it can be attractive and understandable to girls
of any generation,
right. And of any place too.
Yeah.
So
because she was kind of like a misfit,
right?
And I think girls love misfits.
Yeah, there's very few. I mean, there are stories in which the female protagonist is perfect and wonderful, but
right.
I think that you get a lot more, again, longevity out of a story in which the protagonist is flawed and even recognizes it herself. I think at one point, I'm paraphrasing, but she's like, I'll never fit in with anybody.
Right.
I'm not good enough. She doesn't feel good enough. And I think that that's a thought that goes through so many people's minds.
Yeah, for me, what I think of when we're talking about that is Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
Like Elizabeth, she also was not fitting in with her society at the time, and that was also extremely popular as a book.
And I think that's another story that's been told and retold many, many times over, not only in its original form and title, but I think that they've kind of readjusted it for different parts of the world, and it's been in TV form and movie form. That's one with Mr. Darcy, right?
No, Mr. Darcy is Wuthering Heights.
Okay, I'm trying to. I know that there's.
I can't remember his name though.
Because I know that there's the guy from Bridget Jones's Diary that.
Hugh Grant.
And the other one, Colin Firth. Colin Firth, who played. His character in that movie is Mark Darcy, and it's because he was on the TV version of, I think, Pride and Prejudice, that as Mr. Darcy, and the author of Helen Fielding of Bridget Jones's Diary liked him so much, and she had such a big crush on him that she basically updated the character for the 20th century or 21st century and made sure that he was cast in the movie. Like, as she was writing the book, she's thinking Colin Firth, and then when the movie comes out, he's in it.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like, but yeah, those stories, it seems like that 19th century on both sides of the Atlantic, there is that arrival of women. Women have always been there, but what do you think is the reason why back then women's status in society was going up?
Well, it was about time, wasn't it?
Right, yeah.
I think maybe that's why, because, wasn't the suffragette movement was at that time?
I know that in reality, the Alcotts were major parts of the Concord Transcendentalists movement, and all the Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. I think one of those two guys actually babysat for the Alcott girls, and they promoted those kinds of progressive reforms. And it seems like on both sides of the Atlantic, the reason why that was changing so much had everything to do with women in the workplace.
Yes.
The mills in Manchester, and then here in the United States, same thing. I think about, there's a wonderful painting by Winslow Homer called Morning Bell, or The Old Mill, and it shows a young woman walking up a ramp from her old life, which is shown by girls wearing farm clothes, to go to the mill, and she's quite literally in the painting being elevated. Her status is elevating.
Nice.
And women have always been in the workplace, but it seemed by the time that, because the Civil War was going on in this country in the 1860s, and just like it repeated itself in the First World War, and it would again in the Second World War, women were forced to take up things that the men had left behind for them.
Right. That's just what I was going to say. Right, during the wars, the women had to take care of everything suddenly. Yeah.
So I'm thinking this copy, this Scholastic, which means it was meant for kids. That's the intended audience, young girls, and it's abridged, so it's a little bit shorter. They can handle it a bit better.
Yeah.
In 1954. These are kids that grew up through World War II.
Right.
And while American girls might not have had nearly the kinds of sacrifices that their British counterparts did during that same war, if rationing was a inconvenience in America, it was a necessity in England.
Right.
But it was still getting through that kind of struggle that appealed to them. And so that story, it seems to kind of show up every now and then whenever there's women struggling, women's status moving up, if my wife was here, she could tell me every year that a movie of Little Women came out.
Oh, really?
But they seem to not be, think about like the last one, the most recent one.
Yeah.
The timing is, what's been going on
Yep.
since, for the last 5-6 years, it's, Me Too and, a new women's rights movement seems to be emerging. And
Yeah.
so kind of time for that.
That's true. And then there was, I don't know if you know the book by Geraldine Brooks, March.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think she won like a Pulitzer Prize, or she won some big prize for that.
And that's just like so many stories like that, which that's another reason why they stay alive, is because people keep adding to them. The author's name escapes me right now, but the gentleman who wrote Wicked, which is of course Witch is about the Wizard of Oz, which is absolutely another example of that, where it's the Wizard of Oz has never really gone away, but it was brand new in 1900. Nothing like it had ever existed before. Right. And it seems to just kind of like every 40 years or so come back again. So like the Wizard of Oz, the movie, 1939, The Wiz, 1978.
Yeah.
We were just talking about Star Wars. That's kind of Wizard of Oz-ish.
Yeah.
There's a metal guy walking around.
Right.
And, Chewie's the Scarecrow or the Lion, either one. And so, and then I think, Return to Oz, and then there's, more recently, nobody watched it, but there was that one with James Franco about the Wizard of Oz. Yeah. But Wicked, I think, has kind of taken that. They're like, no, we're the retelling that everybody should care about right now.
Yeah.
And so it's the same kind of pattern. It seems to be every time, we kind of lose our way, we need some kind of fable or story, or in this case,
it's something familiar.
Yeah.
Something familiar that makes us feel maybe grounded or not, I don't know, nostalgic, but also familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. And books seem to be the way to do that. You can make movies, you can make video games and websites and all that. I was just interviewing a friend of mine who wrote a book, and it's autobiographical. It's about her life growing up as a foster child, and she could have just as easily made a website, some kind of support site, or she could have made a documentary video or something like that. But she said a book, you can have it. You can touch, you can be interacting with it much more than anything else. So this one, 95 cents in 1954. Don't let anybody tell you that wasn't a lot of money in 1954.
That is a lot of money.
It was a fair amount, but it's definitely under $1. And, I'm sure that mom and dad could probably afford to send and Scholastic book fairs still go on now, where
they do.
They roll in those big metal carts, and again, my librarian wife can tell you all about that.
And my daughter, that was her favorite part of the school year was the Scholastic fair.
And they go with enough money, and that's the kind of thing. And the graphics on that cover are very contemporary for the 1950s. Doesn't it? It doesn't
absolutely.
look.
The hair.
And I have another one that I didn't bring, but it's even more obviously trying to appeal. It's from, I think, just a couple years later, might be 1960, and it looks like Barbie dolls on the cover. It's still Little Women, but they look like, the faces look like Barbie doll, and I'm like, that's not.
Are they like thinner?
Yeah, and they have like the,
pointy.
they're wearing like makeup. Jo and her sisters didn't wear makeup. That was. That was glamorous. That wasn't something that, girls in their upbringing would do. And so...
well, and it's funny, it says on the back, too, dignified, sensible Meg, fun-loving tomboy Joe, shy, gentle Beth, and beautiful lady like Amy.
That's so funny. And because they're using modern terminology to describe him.
Exactly.
Tomboy wasn't, I mean, maybe it was a term in the 19th century, but I don't think it was. I think it might have been something specific to the post-war period, or at least 20th century. That's so crazy. So they're clearly trying to cultivate a new generation,
right,
to be, preservers of the story and to really enjoy it. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. And that you picked it right up. And everybody here, that's just what we do on the EPS podcast. We choose random things like books, and we call them primary sources. So Ruthie, thank you so much for joining me on this. Thank you for listening to this short episode of the EPS podcast. I hope you've enjoyed what you've listened to so far. Short episodes like this one, which are products of my EPS Podcast Live exhibits, will be coming out Tuesdays this season, while longer episodes, deeper dives into subjects, are posted on Thursdays. If you like what you hear, consider becoming a patron by going to patreon.com/EPS Podcast. Follow the show on social media, including YouTube and especially on Instagram. I look forward to you tuning in again to the EPS Podcast, where everything is a primary source.